How do I express my feelings while respecting boundaries and avoiding people pleasing? So there's a little more detail here. I've often found that one's anxious attachments can manifest into people-pleasing tendencies like repressing your own emotions for the sake of the relationship or overextending yourself. Do you have any tips that would suggest a better way to communicate with kindness and compassion how you feel while also honoring your boundaries? Great question. So boundaries tend to be an indication of the needs that exist underneath them, right? And our needs always inform our values and our priorities, our preferences, the things that feel good and don't feel good in a relationship. But sometimes we can harbor negative beliefs that boundaries are mean or they're selfish, which kind of keep us in a confused and insecure state when we have to negotiate boundaries in a relationship. And that's usually because there were either simple or complex shame blocks that were assigned to whatever you were expressing in terms of your needs. So we start by kind of deconstructing these underlying beliefs, because unless we address them on that level, the shame will just find new shapes and forms to express itself. Even if we learn all the right things to say, we're still going to be holding that in our bodies. And maybe it sounds like we're saying the right thing, but we're consumed with fear because the words don't match up with what we're terrified the consequence is going to be. So for example, there's typically, I think, 6 dimensions in which these limiting beliefs about our boundaries usually express themselves. The first, I would say, is toxic positivity. The second is anti-dependency. The third is abandonment fears. Fourth would be emotional enmeshment. 5, issues of self-sacrifice. And 6, we wind up with confused power dynamics. So I talk a lot more about these in depth. I have one more video to go. We're releasing a 4-part video series on shame and how shame gets tied into our attachment styles and using our therapy approaches to heal these sort of shame wounds that we have. And I'll leave a link to that in the caption of this video. But for now and for this segment, I'm going to just offer some examples of what it might look like, of what these dimensions might look like in the way that we think and believe about things. So the first one, if we're taking a look at toxic positivity, when we are clinging to toxic positivity, it can affect our boundaries by confusing them. For example, that might sound like, well, feelings are only acceptable if they are pleasing or positive. But if we were to clear that up and we were to reframe that idea, in other words, release the shame around them, we might say, well, all feelings are my friends, and that's the most positive position I could assume. And my feelings keep me well informed about my inner and outer worlds. If we were to look at this through the lens of anti-dependency, when it is confused, typically with a simple or a complex shame bind, it might sound like, well, to meet my own needs, it must mean that I have to either be alone or have to figure out how to love myself in isolation. This kind of anti-dependency. If we were to clear that up, it might sound like, well, meeting my own needs includes establishing safe and loving connections with others who are supportive and willing to help me. If we were to look at this through the themes of abandonment, fears of abandonment, the confused expression of that might be, if I want something for myself, I'm abandoning my partner and excluding them from my life. If we were to clear that up with the boundary establishment, we would say, saying yes to myself is not saying no to you. In fact, it invites you to know the real me. And if we were to look at this through the lens of emotional enmeshment, the more confused way or confused beliefs around this might sound like, well, I don't have a right to my needs if somebody else is struggling with them. And so if we were to clear that up, we might say, my needs are valid no matter what, and someone else's struggle does not negate them. In fact, it creates opportunities for us to grow and get to know each other better. If we were to look at this through the lens of issues of self-sacrifice, right? The confused beliefs around these boundaries might sound like, well, love requires a measure of suffering and self-sacrifice, otherwise it can't really be true love. And if we were to clear that up, it might sound like, well, if it feels like a sacrifice, it just means a boundary is being stimulated, and we want to make sure that every compromise we're making really aligns with our values and priorities. And lastly, this confusion around power dynamics. So the limiting belief might sound like it has to be their needs or mine. Someone is always giving or taking more than the other. And if we were to clear that up, it might sound like, well, conflicting needs can coexist and even contribute to one another with curiosity, acceptance, and compassionate communication. So asserting our boundaries really requires being mindful of the impact of our behaviors on someone else. And if we're trying to communicate them, that also means being mindful, in my opinion, of someone else's attachment style and how they give and receive information. So for example, with avoidant partners, they're typically more amenable to what are called soft strategies in communication. Soft strategies are communications that express appreciation, respect a person's individual autonomy, and also creates opportunities for them to make choices. So instead of saying something like, we never go out anymore, which is basically you saying that you have a need for variety, you have a need for stimulation, you have a need for connection in a different and unique and stimulating way. We might say that in a different way. So we might say, wow, spending time together really lights me up, and I enjoy it when we do XYZ. It's actually really important to me to have that in a relationship, and I'd love to do more of that in the future. What activities do you like sharing the most? I'm really interested in your ideas. Then we have safe communication strategies. And these are strategies that tend to work better with anxious open hearts because they offer reassurance and validation. So for example, let's say someone who's an anxious open heart likes to text a lot throughout the day. Instead of someone saying, or the partner saying, you text too much, you might say, wow, I really love connecting with you and that you want to be this communicative with me throughout the day. I really want to give you my full attention, but it's difficult at work. Can we schedule a time to check in after work hours at like 6:30 p.m.? So this is useful because number one, it affirms the connection. I really love connecting with you and I so appreciate you are reaching out to me throughout the day. You are also affirming that you care about them. I really love connecting with you and I want to give it my full attention. And then you set a specific date and time to connect. So it makes it unambiguous, right? Can we connect after this time? And because it's for work hours or what have you. And so that makes it very clear that it's not about something that you're rejecting in them. It's just because you're distracted at work and you want to give them your full attention. So this is what we would call a safe strategy. Now, what about disorganized partners, or what are sometimes called fearful avoidant partners, who are predictably unpredictable and can feel more avoidant one minute and anxious the next? You would want to feel into, in the moment, are they pulling away or are they pushing harder? If you feel like they're pulling away, then you use the soft strategies. If you feel like they're pushing harder, then you use the safe strategies. Okay. If you want help learning more about that, you need some assistance communicating boundaries and needs using things like safe or soft strategies. Again, I'd recommend watching the introductory training for my Courageous Communication course if you're not already signed up for that. So that's a training we go over my 3-step HIP communication formula, and it digs really deeply into how to identify your needs and communicate them using a compassionate vocabulary, incorporating these different strategies, and also doing it in such a way that you feel like you're not people-pleasing or abandoning yourself in the process. So if you want to learn more about that, again, we'll leave a link to that in the caption of the replay. So I hope that helps. I'd love to see in the chat if this is resonating with you or if this is making sense. Also, remember to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications. I put out videos once a week and I wouldn't want you to miss out.